I'm excited to have Jon Guerra here on the Beyond Sunday podcast. Jon, how you doing today? And welcome to the show.
Thanks, David. I'm doing very well this morning. You caught me post workout, which is always a good John. And just getting my first little cup of tea here and excited to chat with you.
So I was reading up on you a little bit, and it sounds like you started writing songs when you were like 12 years old. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
So I have an 11-year-old, and he's about to turn 12, like in a month, and he's not really writing songs in his stage of life right now. So I want you to take me back to your 12-year-old self and what it was like back then, I guess, in terms of like why songwriting was an outlet for you at that time.
Well, I should start by saying I was not writing I was writing very bad songs. They were atrocities of songwriting, truth be told. But I had no sensibilities to tell me it was bad or not. It was just something that I used to express myself. So my family, I lived in Houston, Texas until I was 11. And then at 11, my dad got a job as a pastor up in the suburbs of Chicago in a town called Wheaton. And he started working at Wheaton Bible Church. And we moved the summer before my eighth grade, before I went into eighth grade, before I turned 12. And I'm an only child and, moved at the beginning of the summer, didn't have a ton of friends. There weren't a lot of kids in my neighborhood. And my mom sent me on this kind of youth group trip that summer so that I could try to make friends. And I was mortified to go. I was like really shy. Like, I don't want to go. And I went. And it was just like 12 of us kids on this trip. And the youth pastor would get up every night with his Taylor guitar and no amplification, no PA, would just lead some praise songs. And the first couple nights, some of the kids are closing their eyes. Some kids are doing this, hands up in the air. And I thought it was really weird. We didn't do that at my church or my dad's church or the youth group that I went to. Actually didn't have a youth group. It was so small. But I thought that was really strange. And I was like feeling uncomfortable until night 4 when, I had an experience that I feel I now have language for. It really was just kind of an experience of um, feeling perceived by God. I remember having this distinct feeling that somebody was watching me. I kind of looked around the room and nobody was watching me. And then I just had this sense like, I see you, John. It was this
Mm.
like, and I don't, it wasn't an audible voice, wasn't anything too wild, but in my heart, I suddenly felt like, oh my goodness, God is real. All this is real. And I kind of closed my eyes and I started singing and then my hands were in the air. And so by the end of that trip, I was enamored with worship music. And I went up to the youth pastor and I said, what are you reading off of? What is this page with these little letters above the words? And he's like, oh, this is a chord chart. You want them? I'm like, sure. So I went home, took my allowance money to Guitar Center and bought myself a chord book. My mom had a guitar, kind of beat up Yamaha guitar, when acoustic guitar from when she was in college, and I started teaching myself guitar. And as soon as I learned GCD, I started kind of writing my own songs. And I didn't really wasn't self-conscious. I just thought, man, it was like the most drippingly earnest 11, 12-year-old kid just kind of singing a bunch of put together Christian words to God. I was just like would go up in my room and just kind of play and sing words that would come to mind, and it was really special. And then I started playing in church, you know, like guitar, acoustic guitar number 3 that isn't even plugged in, playing in church type
Yep.
thing. And then I finally got to be plugged in by high school, and I just kind of became obsessed with music. That's kind of how it all began.
So so your passion for music started with worship, right? It wasn't like,
Hmm.
hey, I love music and then I became a worship leader. It was like I love worship music. That was like your first love.
That was, yeah. I mean, I remember liking music before. Like, I remember my parents had the first jars of Clay CD and listened to that all the time on the way to soccer practice and loved that.
Yeah.
Just like youth group bands like Audio Adrenaline, Newsboys. It was like we only listened to Christian music back then. In fact,
Yep.
a couple years later, I got the first Switchfoot record, and my mom read some of the lyrics and
A
threw
little
it
edgy.
away. So, yeah, exactly. Just to kind of give you a little perspective. She's not that way anymore. But yeah, but the real first experience of like, oh my goodness, this is doing something to my soul, to my body. I was trying to go after whatever happened to me in that room, and I was trying to chase that experience. because it felt more real to me than anything I'd ever experienced. And suddenly I was kind of lonely that first summer. And I remember distinctly coming back and not feeling lonely anymore. And so it was, God was always a given in my house. And I don't remember ever not believing, but there was something that a switch got flipped through worship music that summer. And yeah, just at any time there was a worship thing at church, then I was there. Sunday night praise, Tuesday morning Bible study, Wednesday night for the seniors, Monday night at the nursing home. It's like anytime there was like a worship thing happening, it's like I was there because I just couldn't get enough. But yeah, I
Yeah.
started with worship music.
Do you remember the first like worship song that you wrote that you led in church?
Well, it wasn't until college. So in high school, I kept leading worship, but I started writing songs and I realized that the songs that I was writing that I would want to perform for people weren't worship songs. Like my
Mm,
songs to God felt too personal. And so I would never play those out. But I started a band and we would do like basically just, it was basically a Radiohead cover band, but we claimed they were our own songs, and I was just writing about girls or my life or being in high school and being
yeah.
awkward, whatever it was. But kind of the God songs were just sort of like for the journal. And but in college, I was leading worship. I went to Moody Bible Institute and was leading, and kind of felt the inclination to change some lyrics to certain songs, certain hymns. I was probably, I was a know-it-all Bible student, most likely. But also, songs like the doxology, praise God from whom all blessings flow, I wanted there to be more lyrics to that song. So I wrote 4 stanzas to that. And I remember playing that in school. And, then students would come up to me like, oh, I love those lyrics. Where'd they come from? Then a couple of my professors too were like, oh, it's amazing that you found those old lyrics to doxology. Where did you find that? I was like, oh, I wrote them. They're like, you wrote those? Wow, they're so. And I just got, complimented for the lyrics, and that felt really good.
Yeah.
But still wasn't really writing worship songs until I graduated from college and was a part of a church plant in Chicago, and I was the music director. And I was encouraged by the pastor. He knew I loved songwriting and knew I loved creativity and was really passionate about just trying to use my creativity as an artist and my love as an artist to kind of serve the church. And he's like, well, why don't we, as a challenge, why don't you try to write a new song each week for the sermon? I'll give you the passage, I'll give you what I'm going to write about, and you have a week to write. So for a year and a half, I basically wrote a song every week and played it after the sermon. Some of those were congregational, a lot of them weren't. And it was kind of an incubator for me of like what works, what doesn't work. But then really the biggest kind of like, oh, like people are singing my songs was there's a church in Chicago called Harvest Bible Chapel, and out of that church there was a band starting called Vertical Worship.
Yep.
And I went to college with one of the guys who started it. So I ran into him one day and he's like, hey, we're starting this worship band. Are you still kind of writing songs or changing lyrics to hymns? I'm like, yeah, I'm at this church plant. He's like, sweet, you want to come to a writer's retreat with us this weekend? We'll pay you $100. And I was like, that sounds great. I'll basically do anything for $100 at that point in my life. And went on that trip and wrote this song called I Will Follow. And I thought it was a good song. I liked it. Thought it had a great chorus, and I liked the arc of it. And then I didn't hear from them for a few months. They called me like 3 months later. They're like, okay, that song I Will Follow. Our church has been singing that, and this was like a 18,000 person church, and my church was like 50 people in the city, and this was like mega church in the burbs. I was like, no way. He's like, yeah, we want to record it. So they ended up recording it, and then shortly thereafter, our church didn't make it. It was like a year and a half, and then, you know, it didn't take. So I became a worship leader at that church and started writing with them. And but really, that first one was this one called "I Will Follow." That is still one that I play at concerts, actually.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Yeah.
John, what would you say is your songwriting superpower? Usually every writer has like I'm best at this. What would you say when you think about your writing is like your first inclination? Is it melody, lyric, production? Rank it for us.
It's actually hand motions, David. So it's a little different, but
I love it.
no,
Can you illustrate that?
no, that's only for the prayer closet. It's constantly different. So I when I do kind of songwriting cohorts or songwriting, I put out this songwriting class last year online and have been just kind of coaching people through writing. And something I always say is you're always trying to hack your own sluggishness, and you're always trying to hack you're always trying to surprise yourself, because really what we're getting after is like basically surprise and familiarity. That's kind of what a song is. It's surprise and familiarity. The familiarity piece is a little easy for most of us because that we use our head for that. But the surprise is kind of like that's kind of the heart, and it's hard to tell your heart to just do something surprising. So I always try to tell people, if you're kind of a melody person, then put your instrument down and try just finding a phrase with no instrument, write that phrase down and come up with a melody of that phrase without an instrument. Do that.
Yeah.
And do that 5 or 6 times and then put it away and then do it again tomorrow. Do it for a week. And then a week later, go back and listen to that first voice memo and see if there's something there, and try co-writing with yourself. Um, so I do that. I really, now that I have a daughter and, time is more limited, I value the kind of sneak away for 5 minutes and come into the guest room where the piano is and come up with an idea for 5 minutes, open the voice memo, put it down, forget it, go finish dinner or something. But I would say that my superpower, if I had to be so self-congratulatory at your prompting, I should add, I would say that actually my superpower is my ability to focus on something for a very long time. I don't think I'm actually that great at lyrics or melody, but I'm really good at not giving up on something, and I'm kind of good at knowing, okay, it's not there yet. I think I can take it further, and I'm kind of good at knowing, okay, this is it. So I don't know how that sensibility was developed, but like I will work on something so much longer than at least a lot of my friends,
Yeah. Well,
and
there's like a tension with that, John, because and
yeah,
this is probably when I talk to songwriters, the hardest part of the process, I would say, for most writers is finishing a song, right?
mm,
Because you can be in that state of like tweaking, 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 changing like forever
yeah,
and never get to the point where you're like, okay, this is done. Like this is great.
yeah, yeah.
How do you know when it's done?
Well, the writer never knows when it's done, but the listener knows when it's done. And by that, I mean, inside every songwriter, you have a writer and you have a listener. So when you're writing too much, you're always going to find some quibble with this or that, or a quibble with that melody or that, or even as a producer, you're going to find a quibble with how that goes into that, and suddenly that disappears. The dynamics are kind of falling, and the words are saying the dynamic should be high, but it's so you always have to kind of keep in touch with your sort of like, not to be pejorative, but you're sort of like dumb listener self. Like the person that you are when you're just listening to music in the
You
car
just
and you're
insulted
not really paying.
all of your listeners, called them
I
dumb.
insulted I insulted myself. I insulted, it's sort of like listeners are not actually very critical. And that's actually a good thing because they're just the music and the lyrics go straight to the heart. They're not thinking, "Oh, what a terrible kick tone," or "Oh my goodness, you just used the word great twice." You use that in the first verse, but that's what we think of. We think, "Oh, I've already used that word. I can't use it again." Why? Like nobody cares. Like if it's saying something different, if it's a great line. So I think for me, I'm kind of revolving from, okay, I'm a writer, and then now I'm a listener, and now I'm a producer. So I think I kind of wear those hats as sort of like a way to kind of chop the legs off of each person from like taking too much of the reins. Um, so I mean, that's my only tip. I really, and I open the vault to some very close friends, and I invite their feedback,
Yeah.
and you know often, if I'll take a commit, like if it's my wife and one of my closest friends, if they're in agreement that a song is done, then I'm like, I think you're right. I think it's done. Like I don't need to keep rolling. occasionally I'm like, actually, I know I can take it a little bit further. But really, it's like it's a sensibility thing. I think you kind of develop a sensibility of knowing what you're capable of, and then knowing how to keep yourself going, and just almost like not give up and not put it out, because nobody really cares. Like, I was producing this record for this artist Taya a couple years ago. She's an amazing singer, like one of the best voices on the planet.
Yep.
And we were kind of going through this production process, and it was getting a little long, and we're getting tired of like of the record process. We kind of just wanted to be done. And we had this talk one night, and it was kind of just like, I would like to be done too, but nobody wins any prizes for like getting done earlier. Like, all anybody ever hears is the final product. So like, if we need to take a break, let's take a month break. Like, the release schedule can wait. No one's gonna be like, oh, you released it in April instead of um, February, and so that's, or you released it in February instead of April, so that's why these songs aren't as good. I understand. Like, I'm gonna give you a pass for that. It's like, no, 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 just release it till it's totally when it's done. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling now about
No,
all
I
these
like
things,
that.
but
I like what you said, because what I do as a writer is try not to just be okay with my first idea. I mean, sometimes your first idea is a great idea, but I like what
yeah,
you said where it's like, okay, I'm going to take 15 minutes or however much time
yeah,
I have to just go into the
yeah,
room, set the timer or whatever, and just write something. Okay, done.
yeah,
Capture the voice memo, and then just letting it simmer, go back to it like
yeah,
the next day. I find that so
yeah,
helpful as
so
like
helpful.
just fresh ears on an idea. And then
Yeah,
trying, okay, I had this is the chorus I wrote yesterday. Let me try something totally different and just see if
yeah,
it's any better or maybe it's way worse.
yes,
Whatever. Just like it sounds like you have that sort of playful experimentation. Let's push this melody. Let's dig
yeah.
deeper with this lyric, right?
I mean, exactly. I sort of also like to think of it like gestures and postures. So I have a friend in Charlottesville named Paul Zach. Paul Zach, actually. He's one of my favorite writers on the planet and singers. Paul is like a first idea, best idea guy. And it works for Paul because his first ideas are like insanely amazing. You know what I mean?
So,
But for a lot of us, that's not necessarily always true. But you can use that as a gesture. Like, if we're stuck on a song, if I'm going to co-write or something, I do this all the time. And we're like almost there on a bridge, and it's like we're about to leave. We got like 15 minutes. I'll just say, okay, let's just put a placeholder in. Like, this isn't going to be it, but let's just put a placeholder in. Like, what would you just do if you were just, okay, I need to take a turn before I get back to the chorus. What would you do? And I kid you not, 9 times out of 10, the placeholder is the thing that we end up using because
mm,
you're not thinking so hard about it. You're just kind of like, okay, let me just kind of put something down. And so that's a gesture, right? To give yourself a time limit. Another gesture is like, well, I'm going to put it away for a week. That's a gesture. But if you use any of these things as postures, if you use the like constantly working, constantly, tweaking as a posture, you're never going to release anything. If
yeah,
you use the first idea, best idea as a posture, not as gesture, then your stuff is it's always going to hit a ceiling because your first ideas are never going to get better. You're never going to have the benefit of editing. So you kind of got to know when to use the different gestures.
love that. So, John, in describing your music, you say less Sunday morning worship music and more Monday morning prayer music. I wonder if you could talk about the difference and why that's important to you.
Yeah. So I was putting out a record called Keeper of Days in 2020, and I had been writing a lot with vertical worship still at that time and doing a lot of kind of worship co-writes. And worship music is a genre at this point. It's basically just music we sing in church. Christian music, contemporary Christian music, can kind of, the broad umbrella describes music about the Christian life that maybe you hear on Christian radio, or maybe they're like deep cuts just about Christianity. But this music felt to me like it was something different, and I actually wanted to help people engage with it. Like, I didn't want people to come expecting a Jon Guerra worship album, and then them to be like, well, what is this? I can't sing along to any of these songs. Like the keys are weird. And I also didn't want people to think like, oh, this is like put music on while I'm putting the kids to soccer practice. Like I'd be happy if you did that, but that's not really the intention. I thought, well, what would be the intention for this kind of music? And I thought it's prayer. Like I had been in a season of my life, rather it was the beginning of a very long season that I'm still in, where I was kind of discovering the role of prayer in my life and developing that as kind of a discipline and a habit, and began kind of bringing, well, kind of realizing that since I was 12, I'd sort of been bringing my creativity into prayer in a way, and was sort of like, okay, this is kind of different than what happens when I'm writing for Sunday morning, when I'm trying to write something that is singable and a little bit more basic just for the average person to be able to catch on.
Yeah.
This is like, I'm trying to use as much creativity as I can to express what's happening. I'm also trying to use, I'm taking my cues from the Psalms that we often don't sing in church that kind of express full breadth of human emotion, anger, lament, exuberant joy, grief, praise, party, you name it. I'm trying to use all that as fodder. So I need a word, and I started saying devotional music because it's like, well, this is kind of out of my own devotional time, and this is music that I hope people use to kind of try to draw closer to God through and with. And then, yeah, I started saying it's less Sunday morning worship, more Monday morning prayer, just even to give people a time. And I can't tell you the amount of emails I get saying, hey, Monday afternoon, hey, Monday morning, kind of Jon Guerra mornings. Thanks so much, Ben. I really appreciate you saying that. Also, because I know a lot of my friends and frankly, a lot of my listeners, I have a lot of worship leaders and pastors who are, I mean, just based on people who write me at least, um, a lot of people in ministry take Mondays off. And so I thought, okay, like this is actually time for that. This is time to kind of recharge, and would love my music to be a recharge for people who are in ministry specifically.
What do you see, John, as the challenges for Sunday morning worship music right now? Like what encourages you and what's maybe concerning to you? Like do you see there being any need for some sort of like reform or change in the songs that we sing on Sunday? Because you've been in a lot of you've done the mega church, worship thing, and you've been in a lot of context kind of in your journey. How would you answer that? Like current state of worship music, corporate singing in church right now?
Man, it's a hard question to answer because I feel that my perspective is so limited. I have friends who are still at sort of larger non-denominational churches, and I admire them and their character so much, and I would love for them to lead me in worship if we lived in the same city. I go to an Anglican church now, and our music is baked into the liturgy in a way that's very different. It's not like four songs up top, announcements, offering, sermon, closing song. It's a lot more just littered throughout and with scripture. But I guess if I could comment at least on individual churches, I don't know, but at least in terms of the worship songs that are being released, there was a season when maybe it was radical or or necessary to write a lot of songs that were kind of hype oriented or excitement oriented or victory oriented. I mean, those are distinct things, but I think a regular diet of hype on Sunday mornings isn't actually the best thing for our spiritual lives.
Hmm.
And I think a regular diet of easy consolation actually isn't good for our spiritual lives either. And by that I mean there are long periods of the Christian life when the Lord makes us wait. There are long periods of life when the Lord seems to be not answering a prayer. I'm sure people listening now, there's somebody who's going through a very difficult divorce or breakup, or somebody's kid is off the rails, or you just got a diagnosis for something, and it's kind of sidelined you and the people that love you. And when that happens to a person, I think it sends them to a place that certainly God is in that place, but sometimes the songs give you an idea of what that experience is going to be like. I mean, the hype songs give you an idea of what that experience is going to be like that is just false. It's kind
Yeah.
of like false advertising. And so I think humbly, I would say the danger is that it's poor formation. We're developing Christians who uh, have maybe uh, there's less of a balance in what we expect the Christian life to be. And I wonder even if some of the trend towards even kind of evangelical and deconstruction the past decade or two isn't because there were people who were rejecting that formation and rejecting that expectation for good reason. Now, I in my opinion, I think some of them have thrown the baby out with the bathwater,
Right.
but you wonder if there was a different vision, a different architecture supplied in the music specifically. The emotions in the music are what form us, for better for worse. The great ideas in the sermons also are important and form us, but we live in a very emotional culture and we are constantly being formed and titillated and emotions being drawn. So the thing that gets us is like something that's emotionally captivating. And usually in a Sunday morning, the thing that's most emotionally captivating is the music.
Right.
So if the regular diet of sacred emotional formation is pointing us towards a story that isn't true, then of course people are going to reject that when they start living in reality because they're like, wait, I'm bringing this story into reality and it's not matching up. Well, I don't want it. But there is a story that's true. There is a story that actually holds up. There is like a thick, there's a thickness to the architecture and a sturdiness to the architecture of Christianity and of the gospel and of our life with God that I think our songs can form us to believe if we let them. And that's what I am hoping to kind of cultivate in my little field adjacent to Christian music and adjacent to worship music is kind of a spiritual formation and emotional formation for people that kind of holds them up maybe when maybe the other story doesn't quite hold them up.
Yeah.
It's a very lofty goal, but I do feel quite called to that, and I feel like sometimes I feel like I've sort of been given like a little toothpick to try to go carve out something out of a mountain or something. But it's a very significant calling for me, and it because it really has come from a personal experience of really needing something different too at different
Yep.
periods of my life, and finding that something different in the scriptures, in the Lord, in prayer, and in music, and wanting to offer that to people as well.
Yeah, it's almost like we've created our church services or designed them as a form of escapism, right? Where it's like your life is
Yeah,
really hard, it's kind of mundane, it's kind of boring, you're beat down all week. Come to church and get, hyped up with like excitement and faith and boldness to
yeah,
like take that
yeah,
back into your week. But I wonder if that like works sometimes, but not just as sort of
yeah,
a general template like all the
yeah.
time, right?
That's right. That's right. Again, a gestures and postures.
Yeah.
Is this a gesture? Yes, it should be. Absolutely. Easter, let's go. We just celebrated Pentecost in our Anglican church. Let's go. Holy Spirit is here. God
Yeah.
is doing something in the world. Redemption is happening. But also, I think there's varieties of individual idiosyncratic experiences of the Lord too. So you think of when Jesus was resurrected, Mary follows Jesus to the grave. She goes to the grave and she doesn't see anybody there and she runs back weeping. Doesn't say that she believed, but she goes and tells Peter and John. Peter and John run to the tomb, and it says they left believing. All they needed to see was an empty tomb, and boom, they're off running. Mary stays at the tomb, still crying. So she doesn't know what's happening, but it takes a very tender word. Literally, she needs to hear Jesus say her name for her to believe. I wonder sometimes if our services are so stinking loud, literally just volume wise, that we can't
Mm.
actually hear Christ calling us by name. And then you think of Thomas. Jesus shows up to Thomas, and what does he say to Thomas? You know, put your finger in my wound. Like, he invites Thomas to bring his own woundedness. Thomas is disappointed. He's angry. Like, these people are saying these things, and he doesn't have the heart to be disappointed again. He's hearing reports of the resurrection. He's like, no, I'm not, unless I see him with my own two eyes and put my finger in his wound. Jesus shows up and he says, put your finger in my wounds. Some people need to be called to bring their wounds and literally put their wounds
Yeah.
into Christ. And that is a very tender thing to do. And so for those people, how do we do that? Where is that invitation in the songs that are saying, lift your hands up and get really loud? And it's just it's a different gesture, but they're all valid and they're all necessary. I'm very grateful for the varieties of invitation, frankly, because I don't think
Yeah.
I'd be here without the varieties of invitation. And I think a lot of people wouldn't either.
Yeah. John, I was listening this morning to your EP with liturgical folk, the three gifts,
Mm,
little 3-song thing.
yeah.
And as I was listening, I was just like, wow, this is so rich. You
Mm.
can tell how deep you dug lyrically to kind of find kind of a fresh way, like not landing on just the easy rhyme, but just digging a little bit deeper.
Well, I have to give credit where credit is due. Actually, Ryan Flanagan from Liturgical Folk wrote the majority of the lyrics, and I wrote the music. I was invited to like a hymn write in Nashville a couple months ago, and I was kind of a fish out of water. I kept trying to write a chorus, and they're like, "Take a hike, Guerra. Like,
That's awesome.
let's get some stanzas." I mean, that's one thing. Is like hymns often don't have, a lot of them don't have those refrains. Very strict structures, strophic form.
Do you struggle with that? Like, do you always feel like a song needs a refrain?
That's just sort of what my muscles naturally do.
Yeah,
I
me too.
typically write towards a kind of like I want to hang my hat on something at a chorus, and I want it to be simple, and I want it to be memorable, and I want everything to kind of pivot from that. I mean, there's just different ways of doing it. When I try to write in a different form, I end up writing more like art songs where it's like section A, section B, section D, and section L, and it's more of like a composition musically with some words that are attached to it. But it's really hard for me to write strict hymns. I like changing words to hymns. Like I do that at my church a lot still, just because as a fun exercise. But yeah, the hymn writers, people that are writing hymns now, like the whole Getty crew, hats
Mm,
off to them. I mean, it's its own gift.
yeah. So take us into your process a little bit. What's most common for you? Do you start with a melody or do you start with like poetry? The
I
answer
would
is
say
yes.
just yeah. I mean, just by virtue of habit, I would say music came so naturally to me. Taught myself to play piano in high school. I took a music theory class and it all just kind of clicked. So music is very feels simple, but lyrics I think are where I think I'm more impactful through lyrics than I am with music for a number of reasons. Neither of my parents were native English speakers, but I always loved English and loved reading and loved the power that a simple phrase can deliver. So it's really different, man. I'd say, you know, I would say it's 70-30 music and lyrics, but when I get a melody, often if I'm on a plane and I have a voice memo of something on my phone, I'll write lyrics the whole plane ride. Like that feels very rich to me.
Hmm.
So, but I spend less time on the music because it comes easier. Then maybe afterwards I'll kind of adjust it, but it's fun to do both.
Yeah. What are some let's talk about some like tools or resources that you use. Like what are some books that have inspired you or helped you the most as a songwriter?
It's hard to say. I think everything affects me in different ways. Poetry affects my ability. Poetry is language at its highest register. So the more you expose yourself to that, to good poetry, old poetry, the more you are aware of the possibilities of what language can be. So poetry affects me in that way. I don't read a ton of philosophy, but I do enjoy reading philosophy. And what philosophy does, it really, there are certain ideas that in and of themselves are so beautiful and are so evocative, and that gives me a sense of the possibility of what can be said. Like,
Yep.
what are the things that we can say about God that are captivating? That's what philosophy and theology does. Reading prayer, like, a lot of the old writers, Desert Fathers or Puritans, when they would write these prayers, it puts you in touch with a soul that really is fully directed towards God, and fully like enamored. I think of Teresa of Avila, I think of John of the Cross, I think of Irenaeus. These are people that were enamored with Christ. And it gives me a sense of, or Keith Green, for Pete's sake,
Oh
it
yeah.
gives me a sense of like, I want that heart. I want a heart that like is that naturally directed and naturally postured towards God. And of course, fiction is just a beautiful. I'm not sure how fiction would affect me. I don't write very many story songs, but fiction helps with, I think, the earthiness of lyrics. Often fiction writers are painting pictures. They describe, you know, the light refracting off the hanging pot in the kitchen, and it looked like a little dancing fairies, reflecting off the wall or something. And it just puts you in that room. And I find that very useful too, in lyrics too, to kind of keep things textural.
Yeah, I love that because the worship leader in me, when I try to write a song, like I immediately box myself into like, can a congregation sing this? Or how will this
Hmm.
feel in church? Like immediately. Like I don't even
Yeah.
really allow the creativity to just sort of go where it could. It's like just naturally in that
Yeah.
box. Like, do you have sort of those boxes, or you just start the creative process and take it wherever it goes?
Yeah. No, I mean, I've learned those boxes. So I've learned the church box,
Yeah.
but what I get most excited about is kind of the, how does this feel? How does the song hold up when I'm in myself in a prayerful space?
Yeah.
How does the writing itself hold up in that very tender, when my attention is not distracted, when I'm fully present with God? How does the song hold up there? Because sometimes I can hear myself trying to write a great hook or trying to write congregational. And then when I'm sitting there in prayer, it's like, you know, try to, what is the most essential? What is the most immediate? And then I think of, I try to keep that feeling and make it come out of the speakers.
Yep.
So a lot of people listen to my music on headphones or in the privacy. They listen to it alone, or they listen to it when they're going through hard times, or when they want to rest. Or so I kind of have that in mind, knowing like, oh, people are coming here for maybe that Monday morning prayer. So I want to honor that experience for them. But I don't, with my music, I don't think as much, what would a congregation sing, or how would this sound in church? Just because that's not really what the John Guerra stuff. That's not really the use for it. So, but
Yeah.
it's cool that it's your use. It's like I
Yeah.
I happen to have a both a passion, vocation, and a career making records for people and for myself. And I feel called to make records the best as I possibly can. Like these,
Yeah.
like, I would like to make a great work of art one day, and so I'm like
Yep.
inching towards that, God willing.
Do you have a favorite tool that you use as a writer? It could be anything from, a certain notebook, a certain software, an app, a certain pen that you use, or a favorite instrument. What do you use regularly or brings you inspiration?
Yeah, for me, the piano with the felt pedal on is kind of my most inspiring place. Practical tools, the Notes app on my phone, and then the Voice Memos app. Simple, but I mean, the majority of my phone use is on those two apps. And you can tag voice memos, you could put them in Notes, which is great. Then you can share that with people. Um, I just bought a new guitar off of Facebook Marketplace. Actually, this is an old '63 Gibson J35, and it was made as like a learner guitar back in the day, but it's been totally redone set up and outfitted by this really great luthier, and I intended to get it so I could high string it, but now it's just so fun to play that I've kind of been riding with it lately, and it's fun to kind of get something like that. Also, I got a rubber bridge guitar that's a baritone, so that's kind of nice because it's very deep and it has a very different sound.
Yep.
So that's been really fun lately.
Yeah, I love that. John, before I let you go, I want you to talk a little bit about your devotional songwriting masterclass and what that is, and
Yeah,
for our listeners that just might want to do it. Like, take
yeah,
us into what you created here.
yeah. So about a year ago, I filmed myself kind of giving a bunch of lessons that I'd given to churches kind of around the country. They'd invite me out to maybe do like a songwriting retreat with their team, and I'd always do some kind of like lessons beforehand. And I kind of recorded all that and made that available on the web. You can kind of go through it on your own time. And the distinction, there's a lot of songwriting classes out there, a lot of great ones. But this isn't a worship songwriting class, and this isn't like a CCM songwriting class. This is a devotional songwriting class. And I've already talked about the distinctions a lot on this podcast. But in terms of the process, I really made it for people for whom creativity was once a way for them to express themselves to God, but maybe in their adulthood, or maybe they're in college or something, even in high school, they're kind of getting discouraged because they're like, well, all the songs that I would ever want to write have already been written. I'm not that good. I'm not going to get a song on the radio. My songs are not going to be played in church. So I'm just not going to do it anymore. And I wrote it for those kind of people. And the reason I did that is because number one, I want to encourage those people that actually God gave you the love for creativity, not for any of those other reasons. He gave it to you so that he can hang out with you while you create. And so that you can find the joy and the beauty in just creating over a long period of time and watching yourself grow. And I kind of liken it to fly fishing. No fly fisherman or fisherwoman ever goes fly fishing and thinks to themselves, what was my ROI on this time I spent on the water?
Yeah.
You don't think, what's my return on investment? But it is its own reward. So songwriting is meant to be its own reward. Creativity is meant to be its own reward, especially when it's creativity that is directed to God in prayer. It becomes this like part, in the class I talked about, a devotional song is personal, prayerful, and crafted. And I kind of help people, bring out the aspects of their life that they're maybe afraid to write about and kind of delve into those places. Prayerful, how do you invite God into those places and then direct them towards him? And then crafted, how do you take the personal and the prayerful and funnel it through a form? And what is form? And when you do that, it's like you get this part of your life that you've invited God into, and then you have it in this little artifact. And it's beyond fun for me, and I think it's beyond fun for people. And a lot of people have gone through it, and I'm starting to do little kind of online cohorts now, and I'm doing a retreat in the fall here in Austin. And it's just been a really, rich way to both engage with other people who are interested in kind of doing what I'm doing as well. And kind of, it is a ministry. I really, it's not like the price is not outrageous and I try to keep the prices low. It's really just like I'm trying to help people find their own prayer language with God, and kind of reignite that thing in them that I think God put in them. And yeah, if that sounds good to any of you, then it's let's see, Jon Guerra Masterclass.com. Let me double check what that
Yeah, I was
is.
just looking at it. JohnGuerraMasterclass.com.
Yeah,
There it is.
and it's a very simple, plain website by design. Nothing artsy about it because frankly, we're just trying to get it to people and get you writing and you be the artist, not me.
Yeah. No, I love that. So make sure you check that out, JohnGuerraMasterclass.com. John, what are you working on right now that you're excited about? Any projects you're producing or records
Yeah.
you're working on? If you can, let us know.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I'll save the most excited for last, but I just finished working on this project with the Porter's Gate, all on like politics and election songs that should be coming out either the spring or the summer. And I have a song on there called The Kingdom that I sing with Sandra McCracken that I'm very excited about. I am producing a song for Sky Peterson, who's a great new singer songwriter, producing some music for this artist named Tanil Neda. She's out of Australia, one of my favorite voices and writers in kind of the devotional music space today. I'm helping out my buddy John Van Dusen in California make some of his songs, his next record. And then I'm kind of opening up in the fall and the spring. I'm producing for a lot of people that have gone through the master class. So kind of trying to again make the
Cool.
production thing a little bit more affordable and working with people to do that. And that's been very fun just to kind of like, invite people into the next step. And then the thing that I'm most excited about is my next record, which is I just went into the studio this past week for the first 3 days, and I'm so thrilled about how that's coming out. It's a record about Jesus. So I've been reading the Gospels for a year, and it's interacting with the red letters, baby, things that Jesus said, responding to them, sometimes singing them verbatim, and trying to paint a picture on this record of both the varieties of experiences that people had with Christ when they met him, and also the varieties of the different sides of the diamond. You read Matthew, you get one perspective about who Jesus is. You read Mark, you get maybe a little harsher perspective. You read John, you get a mystical perspective. So trying to kind of find a central through line with all those Christ. And of course, it's the same person. It's just, again, the varieties of encounter. And oh, it's very rich, and I can't wait for that. It's probably coming out spring 2025,
Yep.
maybe a single before then. But yeah,
Are
be
you
on the lookout.
self producing, or do you have another producer?
Yeah, right now I'm self-producing. I have some lines out to some friends in Nashville. We haven't landed on anything yet. I kind of want to invite some other friends into it just to kind of keep it interesting. But
Yeah.
right now it's just me, and the more I just do it myself, the further down the field I get. But I really want to, just even by virtue of the fact that the Gospels are also a collaboration that are meant to work in tandem, and I kind of want a little bit of that in the production itself, kind of bringing some other perspectives. So
Love that.
yeah,
Well,
man.
so Jon Guerra, you can find him on social media and his website. I guess we'll just watch that for updates on the record and all that's coming up.
And I should say I'm a lot more active on the email list than I am on the socials these days.
Cool.
So if you would like to hear about this, that, and the other, hear little musings, little essays, little sales in the merch, sign up for the email list.
Awesome. Which is at johnguerramusic.com, correct?
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
there it is. John, thank you so much, man, for your time today,
My
and
pleasure, man. Thanks for having
love
me.
love diving into songwriting, and this has been really rich for all of us. So thank you.
Thanks for having me, Dave.